hearts. Dear Father, thank you for another year and another quarterly. We open up the book of Daniel. It's amazing that the connection that it has with the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. We pray that as we open up the study of this apocalyptic book in the Old Testament, that we will see again your hand guiding history, that Jesus might come and save us from our sins and eventually take us home. Make us teachable, make us humble as we open the first chapter of Daniel today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so Brother Fred introduced us to Daniel's book last week. So we embark into the first chapter. And you got 13 Sabbaths in the quarter. You got 12 chapters in Daniel. So first is the intro. Now this is the first chapter. Although it's the second lesson of the quarter, it's Daniel 1. So you're off about 1. So it's from Jerusalem to Babylon. Of course, I just like to give a very, very 20,000 foot view of what's going on. Although we're studying Daniel, I want to contextualize that in what we call the great controversy theme. We do not study the Bible in its isolation. We look at it from the plan of redemption in God. And as we've studied before, that plan of the covenant of redemption was the everlasting covenant that started from eternity, and it will end into eternity as well. It so happens that there's a prophetic movement. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has been specializing on prophetic proclamation. And the two prophetic books in the Bible is, of course, Daniel and Revelation. And because Daniel begins with Babylon, so we're right about here. In Jeremiah, we move to here. And of course, Revelation begins in the early church, when the church was born. We move here. And we're often misunderstood that Adventists, since they just specialize in this, and all that we know is this. It's certainly true. In fact, the main structure of our narrative to the world, our story, is the covenant of redemption, which begins from eternity to eternity. For the purposes of our lesson this afternoon, I'd like to at least open up the study based on historical records as to, if you were not to read the Bible, what's the first civilization that came into being? So we'll go back right after Noah, after the flood. The reason why, if you believe the Bible, and you're not a secularist, we know that civilization started after the flood destroyed the earth. People won't know that. They talk about the Ice Age, the Bronze Age, this kind of thing. But that's where we begin, until there was the call of Abraham, and the call of Israel, all the way until they were taken into captivity, and they're taken back when we studied Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, so we begin with Noah. Noah had 3 children, right? 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. This is the approximate distribution of the world after the flood. So Shem went to Asia, okay? Shem is where Abraham came from. That's why it's called Shemite or Semitic. Semites. Semitic is Jewish. So the people of God came from the line of Shem, okay? Now Japheth went to Europe, and now we encounter the countries with affinity to the Shemites, or the people of God, which is from Ham. From Ham came Nimrod. Nimrod was the big hunter, big ruler. And remember, after the flood was the Tower of Babel, starts of Babylon. We're going to talk about that. And Babylon comes into the picture because God uses the Babylon as an instrument of discipline and judgment against Israel. That's what's going on in Daniel. And it's amazing, the concept of a literal Babylon during the time of the Israelites, or the Jewish, or Judah, is transformed into Revelation as the symbol of false worship, right? It's Babylon. Babylon is fallen into Revelation. So if we understand some of the background here, we'll have a better appreciation of the last day prophecies concerning Babylon. All right, so this is Mount Ararat, where the ark supposedly landed. And of course, after it landed, we got how many people were in the world? Amen. 8 people, so they got to multiply again to populate the earth. So they traced the movement from Mount Ararat all the way to the land of Shinar. Okay, the reason why we call it the land of Shinar, the 2 rivers, which is Tigris and Euphrates, that talks about Ur. Okay, that talks about the cradle of civilization, which is the Fertile Crescent. You know, everybody reads this. If you study history, the Fertile Crescent is in the Middle East. And the way a civilization thrives during their time is if you got a body of water, because water is a very precious commodity. And if you got a river running by you, that's where people settle, where civilization begins. Okay, so it's called Sumer. Okay, Sumer was the earliest civilization. And this is the timeline of Mesopotamia. The cradle civilization was Mesopotamia in the Middle East. You start with Sumer right about 3000 BC, the Akkadian empires. And then Babylon comes in. And then after Babylon was built, Assyria takes over. And then there is the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Chaldean Empire. This is where Daniel begins. And then, of course, we will go into Persia, which we covered in Esther and Nehemiah. Oops. So these are the 4 basic empires before Daniel came into being. There's the Akkadian Empire, and that's the right approximate date. Then the Assyria comes in, and then the Babylonian Empire, and then the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which is where Daniel's book begins. Okay, Sumer. Sumer is a term, an ancient term. In Hebrew, it's called Shinar. Okay, Shinar in Hittite, Sangar in Egyptian. But what comes to mind when we mention Shinar? This is where they built the Tower of Babel, right? Yeah. Shinar is also where Nebuchadnezzar took the vessels of the temple. That's where Marduk was, the god of Babylon. And one thing else, in Shinar, remember in Daniel when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were tested, the image was in Shinar. Okay, so Shinar is actually Babylon. Okay? I don't want to belabor this, but these are the descriptions of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd dynasty, okay, beginning with Sumer, although the Akkadian, and then Sargon dies, the Akkadian Empire goes in, all the way until you have the Elamites who go to the 4th dynasty, and then Babylon, a city-state in Akkad. And then the second part is after the 5th dynasty in Old Babylon. Remember that name. Everybody knows Hammurabi, right? We derive most of the laws, constitutions, and it was a brilliant guy. One of the, so in fact, they have a parallel between Hammurabi and the laws of Moses in the Old Testament. So one of the most famous kings, which is the Old Babylon. These are the Neo-Babylon. Okay, Babylon was already a world empire until the Kassites invaded Babylon, and then they were taken over by the Assyrians. Okay, there's a Nebuchadnezzar I. This is not Nebuchadnezzar. This is Nebuchadnezzar I. Nebuchadnezzar II is the son of Nabopolassar, but that's back in 1120. Until King Sennacherib eventually destroys Babylon, which is later rebuilt, and the Babylonians defeat the Assyrians in 612. And you know what happens, right? Jerusalem falls to the Babylonians. And then Babylon falls to Cyrus the Great in 539 when we went to Ezra and Nehemiah. For purposes of information, you can just download this. This is the hierarchy of the flow of civilization, beginning with about 3,000-4,000 Sumerians arrive in Mesopotamia, all the way until we go to the Assyrian Empire. Another trend, this gives you all the Assyrian kings, who they are. And then these are the kings of Babylon, and these are the kings of Ezra and Nehemiah. Last quarter, we spent a whole lot of time here, okay? As an intro, we'll spend a little time here, but the last Assyrian kings were defeated by Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar, which is Neo-Babylon. That is where Daniel comes in, right? So it's right about this time where we have the study. So I always give this Bible timeline, which is very helpful because it gives you the books of the Bible and the approximate dates of when it happened, beginning from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And as you can tell, and here's where Daniel is. We're right in the middle. we pick it up there, okay? You got the early days, the nation of Israel, then the divided kingdom, then they were taken into an exile, they were restored, and then finally Jesus comes, okay, and he was incarnated. Closer to a more drilled down view, okay, is we know the history of the patriarch creation, flood and the fall, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You got Moses, Joshua, and the judges. And then they asked for a king, remember? So you got the United Kingdom in Saul, David, and Solomon. And you know, because Solomon married into so many women and a lot of idolaters, God wasn't pleased. He divided the kingdom into the northern and the southern kingdom, okay? The southern kingdom is Judah and Benjamin. Studying Ezra and Nehemiah, some Levites were there for a while. And there, in 722 BC, the Assyrians devastated Israel. They totally wiped out Israel, and they deported a lot of the Israelites and distributed them into the Assyrian nations around. That's why the Jews hated the Samaritans, because they were in Samaria. Okay? They were a mixed breed of Assyrians and Jews. So the pure Jews were those who remained in Judah, and they were taken into Babylon. You got to appreciate, they always say this. Imagine, why did God not allow Judah to be wiped out the way Israel was wiped out? Because if Judah was wiped out, the Messiah will never come. So he needs to preserve a people. And it's amazing how, you remember, we studied this Esther, and even during the time of Esther, there was almost a genocide. Everything was gained in Haman, but God used Esther to do that in order for the...
It's also a nice tie to the word remnant.
Yes.
That we are part of. He always keeps a remnant for
Yes, yes. I think it's a very good point by Fred, because while God is preserving his people, not because all the people were preserved, you know, they're really his people. There's a remnant within the people. Right. That's where the true, I've got to revert to my sermon this morning. You can be sitting in church, but you're not really in Christ. We're talking about this before we started. Jesus is saying, they were never really with us. Why you lament them going away? They were never with us. Why would they stay if they were never with us? Okay, so it's another way to look at it. Hopefully this just helps you to give a bird's eye view. These are the main stories, these are the main books with the main events. These are peripheral books that will help you understand to support some of the stories and the narratives there. The founding of Israel, you get the monarchy, the captivity, and post-captivity. This is the outline of the kings of Israel, all of whom were evil. All the Israelite kings were evil. And this is the king. These are the kings of Judah. This is the grid. This is righteous, and this is evil. The redder you are, the more evil you are. Okay, so you can see all of the evil guys here. All right. And then I broke this down to help you. This will be a good reference while you study the lesson. These are the prophets ministering to the kings, okay? And this is Israel, okay, and Judah, the back end. Okay, so as an intro to how Babylon came to be and why Judah was taken there, we begin with the Assyrian rulers, okay, and the kings. You got Shalmaneser, Tiglath-Pileser. It tells you exactly. He began to cut off Israel, tribute from Israel's in Jonah's days, the time of Jonah over here. And they deported most of Israel. They besieged Samaria. They carried the rest of Israel captive. And then they invaded Judah and Exile. Remember Sennacherib? Sennacherib was the guy who sent all of his armies against Hezekiah. I mean, almost 1 million. Okay? And this is where God sends an angel. In one night, the angel killed 185,000 Assyrians. This is what's going on in here. And Sennacherib eventually got assassinated by his own sons. The reason why that was the sons figured that Sennacherib was offering them as a sacrifice so that he can win in the battle. So the son said, no, we will kill him first before he kills us, and then offers as a sacrifice. And then Esarhaddon comes in. He was very powerful. By the way, the Assyrians were one of the most brutal people. They skin you alive. That's why people are saying that's why Jonah was afraid to go to Nineveh, because if you read Jonah, he didn't want to go to Nineveh not because he was scared. He didn't want to go to Nineveh to save Nineveh. He wants Nineveh to be destroyed. Yeah, but that's a different story. And then we go to the last two weak kings, which were defeated by Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, the first king is Sisensariskun. That's why weak. It's not. He was killed in the battle of Nineveh in 612 BC. That was That was a big defeat of the Assyrians. And then they fell back into Haran, okay, in 609 BC. They were defeated at Haran in 609 BC. So the Neo-Babylonian Empire arose at about 609 BC. Now follow me. There's a prophecy of Jeremiah 29:11 about 70 years, right? After 70 years, the people will go back to their land. But really, after 70 years, it's given to Babylon. So if Babylon started in 609, you add 70 there, what date do you get? 539. 539, right? 539 was the date when Belshazzar fell. He was killed, and the Cyrus, okay, through Darius, Gobrias actually took over the kingdom of Babylon. So 609 to 739 is the 70 years that we have. I gave this during the Ezra and Nehemiah lessons that we have, but I added Neo-Babylon here, so you'll know the bird's eye view of the historical background. So we've discussed this in Ezra and Nehemiah. How does Babylon come into the picture? And of course, we also have that energy guide here. Remember Astyages and Mandane and Cyrus? Remember, she had the dream that the kid will take over the kingdom, and they wanted to kill Cyrus the Great, and how he was hidden by the story. Okay, Cyaxares has Astyages as a daughter. She had another daughter behind the energy guide. The name of the daughter is Amytis. Okay? The reason why Assyria fell was Nabopolassar went against the Assyria, and the Medes, the Medians, okay? This is the Medians. They were allies. He also attacked Babylon and attacked the Scythians. How did the alliance begin? They married Amytis to Nebuchadnezzar, the crown prince. Okay? This is very interesting because Nabopolassar was the father of Nebuchadnezzar, and Nabopolassar said, I need the Medes to help me defeat the Assyrians. Let's do this the nice way. How do I do it? Let me marry my prince to your daughter. Then we will be, friends, and we will battle together. And they go Amytis. Now, what's the interesting part is Amytis is a Median, and the land of the Medes were full of mountains and forests. So Amytis loved the forests and the mountains. And when she got married to Nebuchadnezzar, she started living in a very flat country like Chicago. You can see the three states. So she was getting bored in Babylon. So you know what Nebuchadnezzar did? He built the hanging gardens of Babylon just for Amytis. It's fascinating. You research this. How do you maintain a forest in a flat city? Just to water all the trees there. They had to have some good engineering going to the river, bring up the mountains and then going down. So, yes. So, but I mean, how do you water them? Yeah, you got to get that. So there was good engineering happening there. So, oh yeah. But the Babylonians were scientists. But I'm saying Nebuchadnezzar did all of that for Amytis. Why did he do that? Because Amytis was the son of a Median, and the Babylonians and the Medians needed to collaborate so that they can destroy Syria. Okay? And that's the reason why. And of course, eventually, after they collaborated, Cyrus the Great comes in and destroys Babylon. They took over Babylon. These are the historical background of what we're studying here. So these are basically the kings of Babylon. These are, you got Nabopolassar, you got Nebuchadnezzar, Evil Merodach, Neriglissar, Labashi Marduk, and Nabonidus in the end. Nabonidus is co-regent with Belshazzar in the end. Okay? This is what happened, the scattering of the 10 tribes. This is coded, the purple. Okay, so they were deported. The 10 tribes were scattered all over the place. They were taken to Nineveh, go to Gozan. Okay, and during that time of Shalmaneser and Sargon, they were again taken out of Judah here, out of Judea, went there to the Assyrian territory. That's why all the Samaritans are mixed breed. They're not pure. Yeah, they're part Canaanite, and if I were to relate it to their sermon this morning, a lot of them are uncircumcised. Okay, they're not Jewish. Now, this is the captivity of Israel and Judah. This tells you exactly the purple is the Assyrian, and these the Babylonians that took Judah all the way there, and Assyria takes the Gentiles to fill Israel as well. This is the important thing, okay? While Assyria took them out into the corners of the Assyrian Empire, they took other guys in, got Gentiles to populate Samaria. You get it? So they were deported, but they also took some Gentiles to go into Samaria. So what do you have in the Samaritans? It's a mixed breed. That's why the more you talk about this, the more the Jew, an Orthodox Jew, will hate the guts of the Samaritans. Because why are you? It's almost like during the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. You got the Japanese Filipino. There's no such thing. Because they hated the guts of the occupiers. Okay, this is what I told you. 2 Kings 1935, 185,000 soldiers of the Assyrians were destroyed during the time of Sennacherib. Right after Sennacherib was destroyed, and Hezekiah was given a very big victory of God, something went wrong. Hezekiah got sick, right? Remember the story? Yeah. When Hezekiah got sick, he asked God to spare his life. So give me a sign. What was the sign? He brought the shadow back 10 steps in the sundial. Okay? He said, what do you want me to do? Bring it forward, bring it back. And then he said, bringing it back is more difficult. So God brought it back. Okay, some people are kind of very curious. They want to calculate the difference in the time period. But we don't want to spend our time there. Suffice it to know this.
But I think, the main thing there is so spectacular because for that to happen, if you really think about it, for that to bring it back, the word to stand still.
Yeah.
So what happens to people living on the earth?
Sure.
If the world doesn't move.
Yeah, sure.
It has to move at the terrific speed.
Yeah.
And he brought it back. In other words, he caused that things to start. I mean, it just boggles your mind how that can happen.
Yeah, this reminds me of the joke of Ken Davis who said, when I go to church, guys, it's Sunday for them, it's Sunday, Saturday. Go to church on Sunday morning. That's the most difficult time in the week. When your kids are fighting with each other in the back of the car. You gotta get inside. He starts calling you, why do you behave there? You gotta go to church. And then, he was doing this, and he started talking bad things about the kids early Sunday morning. After the service, he said that there was an elderly gentleman that approached him and said, I was ready for the spanking. He said, the elderly gentleman, I tell you, I found out something about those kids. When that happens, a slight touch in the brake will do it. So you touch the brake, boom. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. You go to ride a bus or ride a train. If there's a sudden stop, everybody, just physics, all right? So how would that happen? Move 10 or hold the stand still, do this. That's a miracle for God. God just intervenes. He decides what happens, all right? So it's beyond their explanation. But what's the relationship to the stand of Daniel? Because something happened in the skies, and the Babylonians were into astronomy, the study of the stars. They spotted the thing. What in the world happened? And they found out that phenomenon that happened in Israel because of King Hezekiah. So they sent envoys to check out what went on. What did Hezekiah do? Showed his wealth. He didn't talk about God who was to save him.
Good opportunity.
Yeah, good opportunity. So this was where the setup of Daniel comes. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house and that which your fathers have stored up till this day shall be carried to Babylon. Number one mistake of Hezekiah was he showed all the gold in the temple. Of course, the Babylonians will mark that. Oh, the moment we conquer, those are booties, okay? Spoils of war. You're going to go more than that. What was that they will carry their children, okay? And some of your own sons who shall be born to you shall be taken away. And they shall be what? What's a eunuch? You know what a eunuch is, right?
Can father kids.
You know why they introduced the concept of a eunuch? Because they don't want those serving. They don't want those serving in the palace of the king to mess up with the harem. Yeah, that's why they have eunuch. And of course, these guys will be serving in the palace. Since they'll be serving in the palace, including Daniel and his friends, they were subjected to that kind of practice where they become eunuchs, okay? So there's no record that Daniel ever had a wife. Okay, just maybe that explains that, all right? Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
So Daniel was like,
Yeah, that's what the Bible is alluding to. Okay, so let me tell you the story. This is what happened. Okay, so you're talking Nabopolassar attacking Assyria, and the Medians were also attacking Assyria. Okay, so this is the route. They finally defeated Nineveh in 612, where that was Assyria's downfall. And they backtracked, they backed off. The remains of the Assyrian army went to Haran. Okay? When they went to Haran, this was what happened. Pharaoh Necho II, was the son of Pharaoh Necho I. Pharaoh Necho I were buddies with the Assyrians. So he owed the Assyrians one thing. So they said, hey, help us. We're being clobbered by the Medians and the Babylonians. So Pharaoh Necho from Egypt went up. And when he went up, he said, okay, I'm going to help you. So you'll not be fighting by yourself. On the way up to Haran and Carchemish, he was intercepted by Josiah, the king of Judah, here. And that's what we call the Battle of Megiddo. Yeah, he said, because Josiah died there. He was a good king. Why he intercepted Pharaoh Necho, we are not told. Okay, that's one of the failures of Josiah. Anyways, I guess he was saying, hey, don't go to my territory. Don't go to my territory. You were passing. You want to help the Assyrians? Why go to my territory? And Necho said, get out of my way. Don't get in my way because you're going to be hit by me. Well, there was a skirmish and Josiah died. Okay. Meanwhile, before Pharaoh Necho can go up to Haran, there was a very strong garrison by Nabopolassar over here. They couldn't overcome, even the Egyptians couldn't overcome the Babylonians and the Medians in Haran. That's why 609 BC becomes the rise of the Babylonian Empire. So where did they go? They retreated to Carchemish. Okay? 4 years later, Mr. Nebuchadnezzar, the son of Nabopolassar, went and crushed the Egyptians, both the Egyptians and the Assyrians here. So that wipeout, that was the final straw, the back of the camel. So what Nebuchadnezzar planned to do was to go down to Egypt and subjugate Egypt with a very strong army. But right about this time, he heard that his father died. Nabopolassar died. So what did he do? He stopped right there in Judah and said, I cannot go home to accede the throne, to get the rule from my father who just died without spoils of war. So what did he do? He grabbed some guys, some things where he was. It was Judah. That's where he took Daniel and his friends and took them back to Babylon. Okay? So these were the 3 sieges of Judah from, obviously after, when he went back to Babylon to get the throne, it was King Jehoiakim. Daniel and his princes taken captives, the temple partly looted, okay? And then he came back after he became king because they buried Nabopolassar, now he became king. He came back to finish the job, to go to the Egypt and do the thing. And along this line, King Jehoiachin, he again whacked 10,000 were taken captives, including Ezekiel, and the temple was looted. So if Daniel goes first, Ezekiel follows soon. Okay, you got the two prophets that we have there. And then eventually, the last part, when the temple was burned down and destroyed, that was in 586 BC in King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah was the most foolish of all the kings that was left. You know what happened to him, right? He was taken in chains, and the last thing he ever saw was his sons were killed before his eyes, and they plucked out his eyes. That's how bad the story was. All right? So these were the last kings of Israel. Josiah, we talk about Babylon, Megiddo, actually died there. Jehoiakim, Jehoah, Zedekiah was the last one, and Jehoiachin. So there's another diagram that tells you all the kings of Israel and kings of Judah. This is right about the time where the story of Daniel begins. All right, so I cannot cover this during Esther and Nehemiah, but I think this is a good guideline for us to see what's going on in the story of Daniel. We said that in 609 BC, the Babylonian rule begins. The rise of Babylon was in 609. The 70 years of Jeremiah says it ended in 539 BC. And 539 BC was when Belshazzar was defeated by Gobrias or Darius when he was sent. All right? These are the three sieges of Israel, 606, 597, 587. Again, these are the kings, Amel-Marduk, Neriglissar, Nabonidus, and Belshazzar. A lot of people question the fact that there is no Belshazzar recorded in secular history. There was never a king. They didn't realize that Nabonidus was co-regent with Belshazzar, his son. Nabonidus didn't believe in the God of Babylon, so he wanted to change the religion of Babylon. So he hung out in another country. He left Belshazzar to rule Babylon. Okay? And you know who was the ruler in Babylon when he was killed, right? What was the promise of Belshazzar to anybody who can interpret the hands? You will be the third ruler in the kingdom. Why are you the third ruler? We'll study that later on. Because there were two rulers already, Nabonidus and Belshazzar. Okay, that happened here further. And then in 536, Darius decreed the return of the Jews to Jerusalem. Right, so just to repeat, and we'll cover this more, but these are the decrees that the Persians gave towards the return of the exiles. So beginning with 536, all the way to Esther. We studied this last quarter, Ezra and Nehemiah and the exiles that went. Okay. These are the kingdoms during the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities. You want to have the biblical reference and the dates, you can get the biblical references there. You will notice, though, that when you read Daniel, the chapters are out of chronological sequence. Okay? You got 587, then goes down to 539, 604. Then you got 553, 551. So it's very puzzling. A lot of people analyzing Daniel. Some people are even saying there were two Daniels, first and second Daniel. But say, if you read the Daniel, why in the world did they do this? For us, we've been doing the SS lesson 3 for a while. We understand this because Daniel, okay, let's go here first. See, here's the chronological order of Daniel's visions, just the visions alone. They're not chronological, okay? There's Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, the fiery furnace, and then there's a second dream, and then you got Daniel's first vision, Daniel's 8th vision, and the writing on the wall. It's all over the place. Yeah. Why is it's not chronologically sequenced the way we expected it? Why? Because there's a chiasm. Remember what a chiasm is? The lesson author says the idea of repetition. There's a method of repeating what. But the fact that you have a chiasm, built into a chiasm is a repetition. That's the way Jewish literature puts it. I love the structure. Basically, first chapter is the introduction and the background, okay? And then you got the emperor's dream here. What's the chiastic structure? And there's Daniel's dream of the four empires, okay? And then there's a stand against idolatry here in the fiery furnace, and there's a stand for true worship here. And then you got the sovereignty over emperors and sovereignty over empires. Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar humbled, and Belshazzar was destroyed. And you got all the visions over here, okay? So, who wrote this? Was it Walter Shea? But anyways, I got this, which is really cool. There are two chiasms. There's a chiasm from 2 to 7, and 7 to 12, there's another chiasm. The first chiasm is a historical chiasm. The second chiasm is a prophetical. So what is at the middle? The middle is chapter 7, because it's got both history and it's got prophecy as well, all right? So here's the chiasm. Chiasm in chapter 2, chapter 7, vision of the kingdoms. We already understood trial God's people, lion's den, the furnace, the conversion of Nebuchadnezzar, and the judgment of Belshazzar. It's an exaltation of God in the middle. So what was the book of Daniel trying to convey? They were conveying the preeminence of God in the middle of the chiasm. Around that chiasm is that they went against God's people. God protected his people. And then, of course, he's saying, a bigger picture is there will be visions of the kingdom. And there will be where God will establish a kingdom which will never be destroyed. Okay, that's the stone cut out, and the vision of the kingdoms, the Son of Man at the back end. Of course, there's a prophetic chiasm, okay, which actually begins from Daniel 1 and then Daniel 8 to 12. There are kingdom prophecies. There are kingdom prophecies, the epilogue and interlogue. There's kingdom prophecies with sacrificial animals, king of the north, king of the south, and then the trial of God's people, forgiveness and mourning right in the middle. Okay, so that explains why the chronological reckoning are out of sequence, because Daniel are two chiasms. And you follow the chiasms, you will understand what is right. So the first one is the exaltation of God. The second is how God keeps his people and sustains his people in trial when the last days happen. Okay, this I think is a very important bird's eye view. Walter Shea's S-H-E-A is probably one of the best books in Daniel you can read, authored by a Seventh-day Adventist. Okay, he's the chiastic expert in the denomination. He said Daniel is about Jesus. Okay, and in fact, 987 of Daniel is the reverse. Instead of writing it 789, it should have been written 987. Why? Because Daniel 9 is a short length prophecy. Remember the 70-week prophecy? Okay. Daniel 8 is an intermediate length prophecy, 2300 days. And Daniel 7 is the Son of Man, okay, and the judgment. So this is eternity to eternity. So, but the way it's recorded is go eternity to eternity, go to 2300 days, and then you go to the 70 weeks. So Walter Shea says, if you really want to go in right progression, it should be 987. And this is the way he explains it. In Daniel 9, Christ is a sacrifice. Remember, Daniel 9, the Messiah will be cut off, that kind of stuff. In Daniel 8, where you have the he-goat, okay, and the ram, it talks about Christ as the priest. Okay? And of course, in Daniel 7, when the Son of Man approaches the throne, Christ is king. I always said this, that's why I love Walter saying in his presentation. When we give Daniel, we focus on prophecies and how it's fulfilled, and how all this, Rome, papal Rome, pagan Rome, all sorts of stuff. We talk about that. We miss Christ. But in fact, he's saying when you study Daniel, you must look at Daniel 9 as the sacrifice God designed to save us from our sins. When you read Daniel 8, you will begin to know the importance of God interceding for us in Jesus. And then verse 7, remember that Jesus Christ is coming back. Christ is king. So that is Daniel. I hope we don't miss that. And I haven't read the entire quarterly yet, but I'm sensing that the author of our quarterly is Christ-centered. So there's more emphasis on Christ, which is a breath of fresh air, because instead of prophetic analysis, we have this. And Daniel 2, 7, and 8, right? That's a summary of the vision. These are the repetitions, which is actually covered in the chiasm. You got the image, big image, and you got the beast. And then Medo-Persia and Greece picks it up. Okay? Remember, and we will cover this later on, all of a sudden we see sacrificial animals here, right? These are clean animals. These are beasts, wild beasts. These are not sacrificial animals. That changes when we go to Daniel 8. Why? Because it's now the sanctuary. You do not offer lions in the sanctuary, or you do not offer bears. You can offer goats and rams there. Okay, so the disciples come to Jesus one day. Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the close of the age? And then what did Jesus say? When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So the disciples will say, hey, the world's about to end. Lord, how will we know? So there's one definite sign. Said Jesus, look for the abomination of desolation. Where do you find this? You find this in the book of Daniel. What's the abomination of desolation? All the New Testament prophecies concerning Antichrist are derived from the primary predictions concerning the abomination of desolation found in Daniel. The abomination of desolation is an act done by the Antichrist, right? And Jesus answered to them, see that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. And that's happening today, a substitute for Christ. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. I didn't mention it in my sermon this morning. I didn't have enough time. The difference between it was about baptism, the baptism of Hector and Chris and Marlene. Why be baptized in an Adventist church? Why not be baptized in another church? Because we believe that there will be a system in the last days that will counterfeit the truth of God. And one of the key truths that will be counterfeited will be the Sabbath truth. So I began with ambassadors, ended up with Jeremy Sanico in the end. Okay, here's what happened to the Israelites. You know what kind of life were they leading? They were so bad they were offering their kids to the idols. They were killing their own kids. That's a rule. So the worship of Asherah involved the worst kind of immorality imaginable. It was already immoral. This was taking place where? Right in the courts of the temple of the living God. Well, like it's an in your face. As we got to punish Israel. The Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah only. They were taken to Babylon. And if you want to know the lament of the Israelites in the Babylonian captivity, he said, Psalms 137, by the waters of Babylon, there where we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion, on the willows where we hung up our lyres. In other words, they hung up their instruments. They couldn't play the instruments because they were captives. For there our captors record us of songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing as one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? That's one song. How can we sing? You've taken us captives. That's the lament in Psalm 137. But the promise of God is what? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and hope. We love this. A lot of people love this text. But it's always taken out of context. This was given to the Israelites. Yeah, you may be taken captives right now, but I have plans for you. You will not remain captives forever. I will take you back and I'll prosper you in the end. Okay? So let's go. Christ of Daniel is sovereign in our captivity. So in the third year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, besieged it. We covered that. And the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them, look at this. He brought them to the land of Shinar. Remember, Sumer? Okay, so that's the cradle of civilization. That's where Babylon started with the Tower of Babel. You talk about Nimrod and all. So what did he do to the vessels? He took him to Shinar. What was in Shinar? That was the house of his god, Marduk. That was the Babylonian god. Okay? That's why it's very important to understand, if you remember our study in Esther and Nehemiah, what did Cyrus allow them to do? To take the vessels back. That they, in other words, these the Babylonian gods, it doesn't belong to the Babylonian god, it belongs to your God. Take the vessels with you. That's what he was saying. By the way, for the 70 years that they stayed in Babylon, they had no temple because the temple was destroyed. So how did the Jews worship? Right, this is, I always say this, the concept of the synagogue began in Babylon. And that's the reason why we meet every week here. We meet the concept of a church building. We don't have a temple that we go to. Right? So the reason why that is because the Jews began the tradition of having a place of worship so that God can be worshipped even without the ornaments of the temple. The synagogue was there. Then the king commanded Asaph, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and the nobility. Okay, we already read this. They will be eunuchs. They will be eunuchs. And then Jeremiah said, why don't you build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters? Jeremiah was saying, it's okay, you can be taken captives, I'll bring you back anyway. So cooperate with your captors and live there. Isn't it ironic? They were taken captives, but who was the number 2 in the kingdom? Who was the ruler? He was a Jew. Yes. Yeah. And then even in the Persian rule, who was the queen? He was a Jew. Mordecai was high there. So he was saying, just follow what God, destined you to do. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord in its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. So in our captivity, you will see the sovereignty of Christ. Okay, now in your identity, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, and learning. So basically what Nebuchadnezzar did was got the brightest of all the bunch. and train them so that they can be part of his court. Okay? The wise counselors of the king, competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. By the way, I tell you a quick story. How many of you saw Lieutenant Colonel Espinido? He was here, right? During Christmas. Lieutenant Colonel Espinido is the chief inspector of the Philippine National Police. He is amazing. Of course, I cannot say everything that he told me when we had a long chat. But
Classical.
yeah, but if all of all the people in the Philippines, he's the only guy who goes directly to the presidential palace. Because the president trusts him that much. In fact, President Duterte is saying, oh, if only all my police are Seventh-day Adventists, we'll be okay, because he's not corrupt. He's not influenced by stuff. So all the generals in Camp Crame, the military camp in the Philippines, before they can approach the president, they have so many protocols to follow. They cannot just go in there. When Espinido comes to Manila, the president's men picks him up from the airport, takes him direct to the palace, and they talk directly with the president. So he started discussing to me all the things that has been happening to the Philippines and what's happening to me. But he said, man, you go without God, I don't know how you will survive. All of these are systems of men. I mean, the generals are going, against themselves, against the government. And you think that there was a just cause for this, when in fact it was manipulated by some people. And unless you have integrity, how can you say it was a sad lot. The bottom line is, he was a very simple police officer. Now he goes directly to the president. What made that happen? There was integrity in him. He stood for the truth. I mean, similar to what Daniel did. Okay, the Babylonian curriculum included studying in 3 languages. Wow, Sumerian, the cradle of civilization, Babylonian, the national dialect, and Aramaic, the international language. So if you were a Jew and you went to the school of Babylon, you will end up speaking 4 languages, right? What are the 4 languages you speak? Sumerian, Babylonian, Aramaic, which was the counterpart of English then, and of course you would speak the language of Judah, Hebrew. Huh?
How about Parsi?
Well, not in the Babylonian educational system.
No,
In the-
Persian speak Parsi.
Well, but this is not yet Persia. Remember, you're still in Babylon. You get 70 years, but 70 years down the road.
All the time they were, I think they knew exactly what it was brainwashing.
Sure.
To change,
Sure.
to try to.
To change the identity. Well, but your point there, Benji, is basically when the Persians took over, there was another educational system, and then you introduce Farsi and the rest language and the Persian culture. Remember the distinction of the Persian culture. They cannot break a law once they passed it, right? Yeah, that's why Daniel thrown in Liechtenstein.
That Daniel was written initially in Hebrews and then Aramaic.
Yeah, the first part of Daniel was written in Aramaic, which is the counterpart of English today, because it was for an international audience. Second part of Daniel was written in Hebrew, because it's specifically meant for God's people. So there's a break. I think I have a slide for that too, a breakdown of the language where it was written. But there was a purpose in writing in Aramaic. So it's a general audience in, I think, 1 to 7. And when you go all the way to the last part, it's for the Jews, written in Hebrew. So you actually do it for the people of God. Okay? And the king assigned them a daily portion, the story, food that the king ate. Okay, whatever you eat, then I will eat. That's what. It's so funny.
Taste buds also.
Yeah, it's so funny. Colonel Espinido is a vegetarian. Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Espinido. So he invites the high-ranking military officials to his city, and he serves them vegetarian food. and then one of the generals who became a senator said, "No, what are you doing to us?" And he said, "No, it's like brother." I said, yeah. "Why don't you serve us good food?" And Colonel Espinido, "Hey, bro, what I eat, you will eat." So he gives them fruits, vegetables, and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's what he does. So, anyways, that's what Daniel did. Oops. Okay. So among these were Daniel and Hananiah, and the chief of the year gave them names. Daniel called Belteshazzar, Hananiah called Shadrach, Mishael, he called Meshach and Azariah. Always, when I was growing up in Sabbath school, I always know Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What? It was a combination of Hebrew and Babylonian, okay? But if I was to stick with Babylonian, it should be Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you want to do the Hebrew names, it must be Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay? They already lost their identity. That's why they try. Part of the brainwashing thing. Okay, this is the meaning. This is like a breakdown. Daniel is God, my judge. Belteshazzar may Bel preserve his life under the grace of God. Shadrach, the order of Aku, the moon god who is like God. Meshach, who is like Aku. Yahweh has helped. Abednego, servant of Nego, God of wisdom. Right? But
The moon god is sinfulness.
no.
Cynthia in
You're sure you're not talking about Japan here? Okay. It's the Middle East.
the moon god.
Yeah, moon god is Aku. It's the fact. Remember, I mentioned Nabonidus to you. He wasn't fond of Marduk. He wanted to replace Marduk with Aku, and there were followers of Aku, I think somewhere close to Egypt, and he went there instead of staying in Babylon. He gave the kingdom to Belshazzar just because of the order of Aku. But you will notice they only have one God. And they started redistributing the gods of Babylon to them. Okay, that's the polytheism and the monotheism that Jews comes in. They were just saying, whoever is ashamed of me, I would be ashamed of him before the Father, and they were unashamed. Okay, so although they tried to change their identity, Daniel and them guys were loyal to God, and they stood firm. Okay, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. What's defiling about the food?
Pork. Offer to the god.
It's a bacon? A ham? All right, so we will talk about it. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. Whoa. Is that a clue? Chief of the eunuchs. Okay. Why is Daniel in favor with the chief of the eunuchs? Because he is he was a eunuch in the royal court. Okay, this is the suggestion. You understand? Aside from good looking, there was a prophecy by Isaiah. Hey, instead of talking about God, you talk about your riches. Your kids will be taken from you and they turn into eunuchs. Okay.
I like it when it says they were without blemish.
Yeah.
And blemish can mean a lot of things. These guys must have been nice face.
Oh yeah. Oh,
they clean skin.
Supposedly
hair.
Daniel and the three Hebrews came from the royal family.
Yeah, it's a Judean family.
I mean, when I took the kids to the Philippines, Joshua is crazy about basketball. I said, Joshua, you want to watch the Philippine basketball? So we went to the Araneta Coliseum, the arena. Oh, Dad, it's boring. Filipinos, they don't know how to play. They don't even dunk. How can they dunk? And then when we went in there, Fred, there were a lot of Fil-Amers. Right. Well, they were 6'10". You're talking that they were dunking like crazy. And then, in fact, the tallest player of the Philippines right now is 7'2". He's only 17 years old. They will play for the NBA. Because there are now Fil-Am, not just pure Filipino Americans. They go there. So basically, during the basketball game, there was a mixture of both Filipinos and Americans, and that was what they were trying to do here with Daniel and them. Okay, I fear my Lord, according to the chief, if I do not feed you the food, you might lose weight, and then you'll be pale. I'll be killed by the king. The story. And then, of course, test your servants. If you really trust me, test your servants. For how many days? 10 days. What's the number 10? When you read that in the Bible, 10 is a period of testing. The number 10. Okay. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Take with you 7 pairs. Why? What's wrong? Why didn't they eat? Why didn't they not eat any meat? Is there anything wrong in eating beef?
There was no beef at that time.
They did all sorts
They
of
only
things.
did.
I think more it was there was something especially about that, not eating the king's food.
Yeah.
Because the king, all those foods were savory dishes, and it was, full of, maybe it was all fat fried, and,
But they,
it was not healthy food, but for the king it was, because it was,
It's king's food.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, what
There was
were you
nothing
saying?
in it.
Cleo, you used the word there. What word did you use? What kind of food?
Refer to their gods.
Okay. Well, that's
the original God's food was, of course, vegetarian in Genesis.
well, yeah. Again, that's from the scriptures. Now you got to understand when you look at battles in the Old Testament, the battles are not really against nations. The battles are against the gods of the nations. Right? So I'll prove to you that my God is stronger than your God. And part of that concept includes food. A lot of those foods were offered to idols. Okay? So those foods that were offered to the kings were offered to his gods as well. And just because of that, Daniel purpose in his heart. That doesn't mean Daniel didn't eat. I'm pretty sure Daniel celebrated the Passover as well. Passover, you got to eat the lamb, right? But in this particular case, it was so contaminated with paganism, he didn't want to touch it. Okay, in fact, that's the thing. When you get invited to a party, and what do you do? What's the safest thing to do?
To just,
Order vegetarian, right?
yeah.
That's what I do when I ride the plane, and I'm not so sure what they serve me. Just give me vegetarian. I'm served first for anybody else. And that's safe. I don't have to worry. There's scales and fish. Did they have like a chudakad? You don't have to worry about that. If you get vegetarian, then you'll have no issue. But where's this concept of clean and unclean? Where did this start? Okay, because this whole issue is still relevant today. Some people are saying everything is already clean today. God ordered it. Yes, Genesis 7:2, right? So first of all, clean animals. Right? So this long before Moses, they already had concept of clean animals. In other words, there were animals created that God allowed to be food.
Right.
Not everything is allowed to be food, right? A stone is a creation of God. Yes. We're not supposed to eat stone, right? Because it wasn't created to be food. And God said the same thing. Not because all of these animals were created by me, all of them can be eaten.
Right.
There are some distinctions I want to give.
Why do you think God still have to have those preserved unclean?
The garbage collectors, they need a vacuum cleaner.
Oh, that's nice. For the first time, then you made a lot of sense. Answered Cleo. Yeah, really, because Cleo's question is premised on the fact that all of those animals should be for food. A lot of the animals were created not just for food. They have some natural functions for them. And we have garbage collectors for animals.
Even in the ocean.
In the oceans, even in the air.
You see, the human waste is very salty, and the pig lies salty. They even have salt leaks, for.
Really, if you look at the Cleo, some of the animals that are not supposed to be consumed, says God, they just cycle it out. When something comes out of one animal, they just eat what comes out, and that's how. I don't want to. But that's the way they're designed. They're supposed to collect garbage. And God said, I designed them to collect garbage, and you want to eat garbage with them? That's basically what God is trying to say.
Yeah, and usually, it's just ironic that those kinds of things that are unclean and hideous to us, the kings, those things are usually expensive. So you'll find it on the king's table, not on the common people's table. But on the king's table, those things that are usually like birds of an unusual, nature, they would roast and toast those things, and the animals, that are exotic, that are bad to eat, you'll find on the king's table because he can afford to get them. So these boys were smart. Daniel said, no, I just want to refrain from that. Yeah. He's not pointing out any food, but he just had an idea. This king is eating everything, anything is good. Just give us vegetables and water.
That's why I love my kids. Jamie has been training Lily and Rose, at least when I go. You want some candy? Lily says, too much sugar. Okay. There's nothing wrong with candy, nothing wrong with ice cream, but it's too much sugar. So I mean, too much of anything is bad. Okay. So we got Chris here as a health aficionado here. But despite the fact, why were the animals introduced as food? Because of the devastation of the flood. You cannot survive. The vegetation were not around.
Yeah.
So you got to have another source of food. Okay? And these are like, I lined them up here. Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy. Yeah.
So it's interesting that, why did the God has to put clean? Why did just clean and clean? I guess, what I was just thinking that you have to have some counterparts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot just keep everything very clean, just like.
Yeah. That's why I think, like Ben is saying, some functions of animals are just scavengers.
Yeah.
Scavengers is it's a nice term for garbage collector. I mean, for instance, would you like, Leo, if I offer you like a roasted vulture? Will you have an appetite to eat a roasted vulture? You know why not, right? Because you know what vultures eat. They eat dead carcasses, okay? So,
Or a wild dog or something.
I mean, if you speak in the vernacular,
Yeah.
pag kumain ka ng baboy, if you eat pig, it's just already, it's pig. It's pig. Okay, whatever you do,
It's anything.
Yeah, it's so.
DNA.
Yeah, okay. But again, what I'm trying to say is, that doesn't mean your salvation hangs or falls there. No. That's not what we're trying to say. Yeah. But there's some sense in what God introduced. Yeah. Okay, there's the reason why some things are meant for food and others are not. Okay.
According to Isaiah, you burn the lake of fire.
The reason why the reason why the Bible says that is that it's a question of, here's the question of clean and unclean. Nothing unclean will enter heaven. Okay? And part of the distinction of clean and unclean were the animals and the food. And that's why you begin to appreciate Daniel 8 compared to Daniel 2 and 7. Because in Daniel 8, having to have sacrificial animals, which are temple animals, okay, meant for sacrifice. You cannot get any of the beast in Daniel 7 to be offered in the temple because of the concept of clean and unclean. So the concept of holy, the common and clean and unclean. Okay, there can be an unclean very clearly in Leviticus, and there can also be some common, but there are also holy animals. All right. So what do we do with the communion bread and the communion wine that's left over? I guess Cleo. Cleo is a deaconess. What do you do?
You thread it with properly.
They bury it.
They bury the wine. So.
But why did Jesus said, as often as you drink
Yeah.
this wine and eat,
Sure.
as often, which is saying you should not throw it away.
That's a tradition we also started, because I remember when I was in high school, we were so hungry, we played basketball. We went to the house of my friend, and the grandfather of my friend was the deacon. He had nothing else to offer to us but communion bread. Oh my, did it taste good? Because they were really hungry. You're not supposed to do that, okay? So you know what I do when Eden bakes the communion bread? I eat them before they're blessed, okay? I mean, for the protocol that we follow, it's okay to eat them before they offer, but as soon as they're blessed, anyways.
So David and his men ate the table.
Yes,
The showbread.
the showbread, because they were hungry. And that basically the concept there is
This is a big
life. The law was meant to bring life. And if the law kills, might as well favor that. So, Chris already said this. The original diet did not include meat, right? You still eat plants of the field. Really? Tell me, I mean, if I were to offer my kids, my grandkids food, I'd much rather offer them fruits than ice cream. Because ice cream will not be good for them. They may taste good, but it will not be good for you. So not because chicken and beef are okay. That doesn't mean you don't use your head to imbibe what's healthy for you, right? And of course, you cannot dispute that the healthiest alternative today is a plant-based diet. Everybody will tell you. You don't have to be an Adventist to know that. You can read publications about the plant-based diet, proven by the leading scientific, institutes that we have here and there.
And sugar is very addictive.
What are the 4 S's? You avoid these 4 S's, you'll be okay. Salt, sugar, saturated fat. What's the third S? Never mind. But salt, sugar. If you avoid salt, sugar, and then saturated fat, and those 3 alone, you'll definitely improve you.
How do you know the saturated fat?
Yeah. Well, by saturated fat, I mean meat.
Yeah.
And just say
Loaded
meat. Yeah, that's basically saying low sodium, low sugar, and then you can avoid flesh diet, make it plant-based.
But you know, also, I'm just thinking as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking when he said that the good diet is vegetables, really, and fruits. And God gave us, at the time of Noah, to eat meat. So when you eat meat, some animal has to die.
They're very sick.
Yeah.
Sickly animal.
No. Not meat, good, healthy.
No, it's easy to kill a sickly animal, you know. You
Yeah,
don't have
but
to-
I mean, I don't think they seek out the weak, the sick one. But I'm just saying that if in order to eat meat of any kind, you have to kill. You have to kill to eat that. You know, I'm just thinking, did God perhaps have a deeper meaning later on to say, guys, you know, you can eat the meat, but remember something is giving up its life so you can be fed.
Sure.
Because with the vegetables and fruit, you don't kill anything.
Sure.
And God is saying,
Sure.
would you rather not take these things that you know? And so just from that standpoint alone, when we think about it, you know, I'm eating this chicken. This thing used to run around. This thing used to have life, man. So if somebody came over the head because somebody is hungry, they need you. And I'm thinking that God, if you study deeper and you think and say, yeah, maybe if I'm eating meat, I'm perpetuating what. They say, no, but I didn't kill it. Yeah, but you're eating it. It's somebody killed it for you.
Really, from the get-go, when Adam and Eve were given skin of animals, and the principle there after sin, in order to live, something has to die. Yeah, that's what. You know, and like I said, I'm a pescatarian. If I can avoid even eating fish, I just eat meat and vegetables. I feel better that way. Okay, that doesn't mean if somebody eats chicken or beef or other fish, that they're less holy than I am. It's got nothing to do there. Okay, but I guess what I'm trying to drive at is you gotta have some common sense in what you do. Okay, my friend, I told you, who was Assistant Secretary of Labor in the Philippines, so he became a finance attaché, and I think in Korea or Japan. You know, they have very exotic cultures there. So he goes in there, and it's a very unique culture, a unique tribe. And the part of the tradition in the tribe is whatever the chief offers you, you must eat. If you don't eat this, it's an insult, and you will not have entry into their tribe. I think it was snake meat with some eggs and what have you. He ate it to get into the tribe. So I'm not saying we should eat snake meat, okay? But I'm trying to say God will lead you to the right thing. And again, that's why I kind of agree with Cleo's saying. The problem was not so much whether they're flesh or vegetables. The problem was it was contaminated by a religious ritual within Babylon. It has something to do with idolatry. Your stomach becomes your idols too, you're talking about. But basically, that's what Daniel said. I might as well avoid eating all of this. But remember, did Jesus eat meat?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. No, you know.
When he went to those,
okay. That's good.
They ate what they ate.
So it's very late, the end of Matthew, where he broiled fish. He ate broiled fish. This is in the resurrection body, okay? Resurrection. But since he was a Jew and participated in the feast, he ate lamb. He ate oxen. So, all right, okay. So that's why this guy who was castigating me in the Philippines, who said the prayer publicly in Facebook to say that I pray that Pastor Bing overcomes his fleshly temptation in eating fish. It says so. I had a long conversation with him in private because I don't want to engage him in public discussing. And one last question to him was, don't you wish Jesus was a vegetarian? Because, you know, based on your principles, Jesus will not be saved. Anyways, and I don't want to push it, okay? But you know what I'm trying to say. Use your common sense. For Daniel, it was more important to represent his God than be contaminated with that. We talk about this.
And I also think, being just one last thing, is I think with Daniel, and like with any of us, like conviction was the thing here for him.
Yeah.
I mean, if he was convicted that I'm not going to do this thing, but if he did, God would not have hurt him or punished him.
Sure.
But he went on his convictions, and I think many of us come to that crossroads many times when we are convinced that we want to do this or we don't want to do it. And I think that's where it comes in. If you have convicted of something, do it, because it's the Holy Spirit is working in your heart for you not to do something. And this young man, I mean, he was young, 17, 18, and he was convicted, I'm not going to do this. And he stood by his conviction.
Corollary to what Fred is saying, you got to understand, it was not only Daniel and his 3 friends who were the Jews in the royal court.
Yes, no.
There were other Jews there.
Yes.
All the other Jews ate.
They enjoyed it, maybe.
They were not they were not board top-notchers. The board top-notchers in then were the ones who were convicted, and God, like Fred is saying. At the end of the 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance. After 10 days alone, they were better. So the chief of the eunuchs allowed them to do that. Okay, so it takes us to the last part. This in our loyalty, now in our superiority. Fred already alluded, as for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, final exam, the chief of eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Among all them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Oh, like this, for the first time, all Hebrew. Therefore, they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired them, we found them 10 times better. They were not just summa cum laude, they were 10 times better.
Oh, there comes that 10 again.
Yeah, there's the 10 because the 10 of So it's probably not literal. How can you be 10 times? Everybody's called 10%. They were 100%. I think it was this 10 days is a symbolic number for that.
The 10 fingers.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Okay. So let's apply this. This one guy is a very famous Adventist now. I think 2015. His name is Gerald Pelayo. He topped the medical boards. He's a Seventh-day Adventist. A few years before that, he also topped the nursing board. After he topped the nursing board, he became the board top-notcher for medicine. Then you know what he did last year? He started the school for medical boards review. And he helped Seventh-day Adventists to review. Last year, we had 10 Seventh-day Adventist top-notchers in the board to help this guy out. But he was interviewed. His favorite hero is Ben Carson. He wants to be a pediatric neurologist, like a neurosurgeon. He said, at 4 in the morning, I'm already awake. I spend time with the Lord first. I believe that the fear of God lies at the very foundation of true intellectual greatness. That's pretty cool. I had to grab that quote from him. He was interviewed in one of the leading networks in the Philippines, and he stood and said, of course, Friday sunset, my phone is off. I don't do anything. That's my time with God. Right. And then Saturday sunset, then I'll start my social life. And every day I carve out time for God before anything else. No wonder he was blessed. This is just testimony of the fact that if you, like Daniel and his friends, if you have the conviction to make God first in your life, God will favor you and honor you.
So Columbus was also a Jew. Because at 4 or before sundown on Fridays, he would close the Pirates' Haven, and he won't be seen until sunset of Saturday.
I have yet to read that. I don't know if Columbus was a Jew, but maybe he followed Jewish tradition, okay? But I don't think that Columbus was a Jew in himself. He could have followed Jewish tradition.
Maybe he closes. Okay. Nobody would come in his captain's cabin.
That's good.
And
Well,
sundown Friday.
remember
Comes out only after sundown.
so we have Gerald Pelayo in the Philippines. We have who's the guy in Hollywood today who was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey? You know what I'm talking about.
Devin.
Yeah, Devon Franklin.
Devon, yeah.
Franklin. Friday afternoon, he doesn't work anymore. He comes back Saturday sunset.
He doesn't read emails, anything on Sabbath after sundown.
So this is a repeat of my sermon this morning, okay?
No, it's an African American boy.
Yeah. He was he was, I think, the director of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, he was.
He's a very well-known guy.
Works
In fact, Oprah said, I stand corrected. The Sabbath is the seventh day. You read and look that for YouTube. Devon Franklin and Oprah. So this is the deja vu of my sermon this morning. This is the picture of the ambassadors. Yeah, Hillary's right there. But they won. I mean, you know who were they competing against? These were the leading choirs of all the world. They got the Pavarotti trophy, but the competition was 4:30 Saturday afternoon. They said, no dice. Whatever you do, who cares about that trophy? You know, it just doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, and then they move it, they won. Joshua, when he was playing with the Bolingbrook League, the Filipino League in basketball there, they allow Fil-Am to join some Americans. So Joshua brought Sean with him. He's his teammate in the Andrews Cardinals. He used to play varsity ball. They always win every year, the championship. Because they run the ball. You know how some Filipinos play? They hold the ball. Nobody holds the ball anymore. They go, and then Joshua goes, that's not the way to play. Okay, you want to win? We don't play. We play as a team. That's why they win. They can score at will. The championship fell on a Saturday. And they guess, said, we cannot play. So we could still be in church. And then they get, okay, the best we can do is move it to 3 o'clock Saturday after. I said, no can do. I can't move it anymore. And then Josh went, fine, you can have the tournament. We will not play. It's just as simple as that, you know. But I mean, those are simple convictions. I mean, it's not hard if you're loyal to God. I mean, what in the world, what can you offer to me that's of more value than my loyalty to God? I guess that's the bottom line. Just for Gerald Pelayo, for Hillary and the guys that happened. Again, of course, I did include, because I already preached about it, Jeremy's Sanico. I was really impressed with their testimony. Imagine, she was the ticket of this family. And you know how Filipinos are, like Manny Pacquiao. They tried hard so that they can be lifted out of poverty. A lot of people. And this Jeremy Sanico had the opportunity of a lifetime to be a star and have all the money and go finally be improved from their very poor condition in the Philippines. And yet she wouldn't give up the Sabbath for the sake of that. I was really impressed. So when Hillary sang that song this morning, because that was sang by Jeremy, you never failed me. Why will I be unfaithful to you? You've never failed me, Lord. And that was sang by the praise team in the Philippines before. They started recording things for years ago. But this was her own version. If you look at their own version in YouTube, it's approaching 1 million hits because she was singing from the heart. That's the bottom line. That's what I'm saying. That's conviction.
But, and I just wanted to say, I'm sure there are many, many, many stories of young people and older people around, not only this country, but around the world, where God had honored them for standing to their convictions. And we just don't read about it. We just don't, it's not about, in their daily lives, they stand for what is right. And God really comes through for them. As a young person, I remember, I was like that. In my first job I had, I worked for a Jew. I started out, and I was young. And this guy said to me, and I needed a job, I was away from home because my family was in another place. And he said to me, I was going to be in the warehouse working with a group. And the guy, they said that we work on Saturdays here. I said, we're going to try you. I said, well, I don't work on Saturdays. So they said, well, that's what they do here. I said, well, I better tell the guy just hired me, and I better let him know. So I went in his office after the third day, fourth day, started on Monday. And it's a Jew boy. I never forget him, Mr. Shine, S-C-H-E-I-N, Jew, a very large company. So he sat there and I came in, knocked on the door. I said to him, I just wanted to let you know that I won't be working on Saturday. He didn't ask me that in the beginning. And he looked at me, he said, why don't you want to work on Saturday? I said, well, I go to church on Saturday. I had to choose my words because I've been praying before I came out. My brother was with me over there. I told him what was going on. My parents were in another place. And he said to me, so you don't work on, you go to church on Saturday? I said, yes. And he sat there. So he took a cigarette. He was a smoker. And he lit the cigarette. He said, now, why don't you want to work on Saturday? I said, I go to church on Saturday. You go to church on Saturday. He said, you know what? I have a Sabbath. He said, he's a Jew. He said, I have a Sabbath. And I'm true to myself. But when business came my way, and then I have to do things. So I looked at him, I said, well, I have the Sabbath too, sir, but God asks me to be loyal to you. I like to be loyal. And if I work for you, I want to be loyal to you too. He said, now, okay, listen very carefully. If you work here and you're successful, and I ask you to work 1 week or a month, will you work? I paused and I said, I don't think so. I have to be loyal. It's not. So he looked at me, he said, now, if I ask you to work 1 Saturday a month, and I give you an increase on your pay, will you work? I said, no, sir, I won't be able to work. I'll work Sunday for nothing. You don't have to pay me. I'll come in on Sunday. Oh, we don't work on Sundays. I need you yes Saturday. And he got so upset. He threw the cigarette in the ashtray, bounced off onto the shaggy carpet, and I had to pick it up. I was thinking, hey, this guy's setting the place on fire. But he went back and forth with me. He said, you're the funniest. I don't know what word you use. But okay, you may leave now, and I'll think about it. You know, long story short, I worked there for 18 years, not one day on a Saturday. He finally came in that Saturday. The lady in charge of the department came in, and she was circling around me that morning. I came because I was going to ask what my fate is to be coming on Saturday. So she finally said to me, she said, you know, we work on Saturdays, you know. And Mr. Shine, later that morning, he came in and he asked me about you. And I said to him, the way the place is looking, the bags of material and things that we stand and clean. She said, he did all of this stuff. And he did. So I said, are you happy with him? She said, he's a good worker. What can I say? And then he walked around, he came back to it, he said, well, next time when you work on Saturday, tell him you're working on Saturday, but if he doesn't come in, just forget about it.
That's good. Yeah.
And I worked there for 18 years as a young person, and not once did they bug me for why you're not coming to work there. I'm the only one. So it shows.
You know, some people were saying this morning that the sermon was a little strong. I said sometimes you need to say what the Bible is saying without toning it down. Otherwise, and because of the lack of time, I wasn't able to say this. You know, the final test in the end, right? As a Seventh-day Adventist, you know, it's related to the Sabbath. Not that you'll be saved by the Sabbath. And I always ask this: if you are not willing to die for the small Sabbath trials that you have now, you think will you compromise the Sabbath when they ask for your life? Of course, it's easy for you to compromise if you can compromise in small things. I was about to say that, but there's no time. But I hope the message got out. So let's just review our lesson. Christ is still sovereign in our captivity, you know, in our identity, in our loyalty, even in our superiority. Okay, so yeah, I think this is the last story that I want to share with you. Used to be there were Brooklyn Dodgers as a baseball team, and the New York Yankees, and they're still alive today. There was a pastor who kind of was talking to one guy from New York. He was pastoring in New York. Oh, are you into sports? Oh, yeah, I used to love baseball. What happened? Well, I went and bought this ticket to watch the Dodgers and the Yankees play 1956 in the World Series. So I went in there. Oh, how was the game? Well, we didn't even get on base. What a bummer. That's why I began to hate baseball after that, because we didn't even win. And then this other guy, oh, you were there? What do you mean? That was a perfect game. You know, a perfect game? You know, a perfect game baseball is no man goes on base at all. No hits, nothing. Okay? That was the first perfect game in baseball. You know what the problem was? To the screen. It was Don Larson who pitched the perfect game in the World Series, the first perfect game. And all this guy could think of was his team lost. Because he was thinking of his team so much, he forgot there was a very historic event that happened. That was a perfect game pitched by Don Larson. Again, here's the point. At this point in Daniel, the people of God were taken into captivity. If they wallow in the mud of their captivity, all they will think about is the misery of being Babylonian captives. But if they look at the big picture, history is in the making. God is using Babylon to lead his people into becoming a refined people so that the Messiah will be born. So I hope first study of Daniel gives you all the bird's eye view, but don't ever forget the lesson of Daniel still is about Jesus Christ. Yeah. And all of these are happening so that Jesus will come and there will be reflections about who he is. Okay? Well, let's end with the word of prayer. Dear Father, thank you for this wonderful lesson we had, the testimonies that we heard, the challenges of the points of chapter 1 of Daniel. Yes. Oh Lord, in this world that we live in, particularly in America, it's so easy to compromise. Teach us to love you so much so that you can give us hearts for you. So that when we have a heart for you, there will be nothing that this world can offer that will be more valuable than you. And we can stand for you and for the truth. And as you promise, if we seek you first and your kingdom, all these things will be added to us. And may the best gift that will be added to us be the assurance that you will always be present with us, even until the end. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.